Libya is one of the largest countries in Africa, stretching across nearly 1.8 million square kilometers of North Africa. On a map, it looks vast and open, a broad Mediterranean coastline in the north, and an enormous interior dominated by the Sahara Desert. But Libya is not just a large desert state. It sits at a strategic crossroads between Africa, the Arab world, and Europe. Its northern coast faces the Mediterranean, with Italy and southern Europe beyond the sea. Its land borders touch Egypt, Sudan, Chad, Niger, Algeria, and Tunisia. This position has made Libya a meeting point for trade, migration, invasion, empire, and conflict for thousands of years. Today, Libya has around 7 million people, with Tripoli as its capital and largest city. Yet despite its size and oil wealth, Libya remains politically fragile, shaped by a long history of outside rule, internal rivalry, and unfinished state-building. To understand Libya, geography matters. Most of the country is desert, and this has deeply influenced settlement, politics, and the economy. The majority of Libyans live along the Mediterranean coast, especially around Tripoli in the northwest and the eastern region of Cyrenaica. These coastal zones have historically been more connected to Mediterranean trade routes than to the deep interior. The desert, however, has never been empty. Oasis towns, caravan routes, and tribal networks helped connect North Africa with sub-Saharan Africa for centuries. Libya's size also creates a challenge. Governing a large territory with scattered populations is difficult, especially when institutions are weak. In modern times, oil discoveries added another layer. Much of Libya's national wealth comes from underground resources, not broad-based industry or agriculture. That means control over territory, pipelines, ports, and state institutions can determine access to enormous revenue. Libya's human history goes back far beyond the modern state. Indigenous Berber, or Amazigh, communities have lived in the region since ancient times, descending from prehistoric North African cultures. Over time, Libya's coast became part of the wider Mediterranean world. Phoenicians established trading posts in the west, while Greeks founded cities in the east, especially in Cyrenaica. These settlements connected Libya to trade networks carrying goods, ideas, religions, and political influence across the sea. Later, parts of Libya came under the influence of Carthaginians, Numidians, Persians, Greeks, and eventually the Roman Empire. Under Rome, Libya's coastal cities became integrated into imperial systems of law, taxation, agriculture, and commerce. The region was also an early center of Christianity. This long ancient history matters because Libya was never isolated, it was repeatedly linked to wider Mediterranean and African systems of power. After the decline of Roman power in the west, Libya went through another series of transformations. The Vandals controlled parts of North Africa for a period, but the most lasting change came with the Arab Islamic expansions of the 7th century. Islam spread through the region, and over the following centuries, Arab migration reshaped Libya's language, culture, and identity. Today, Libya is overwhelmingly Muslim, with Sunni Islam practiced by the vast majority of the population. Arabic is the official language, and Libyan Arabic is widely spoken in daily life. But the country's identity also includes Amazigh heritage and regional traditions that predate Arabization. Libya's modern social landscape is therefore layered: Arab, Amazigh, Islamic, Mediterranean, Saharan, and African influences all coexist. These identities have often been sources of cultural richness, but in moments of political crisis, regional, tribal, and local loyalties can become politically important. From the 16th century onward, Libya became part of the contest for power in the Mediterranean. The Spanish and the Knights Hospitaller occupied Tripoli for a time before Ottoman rule began in 1551. Under the Ottomans, Libya was tied to a wider imperial system, but local power holders often enjoyed significant autonomy. Tripoli also became associated with maritime conflict in the Mediterranean, including the Barbary Wars of the 18th and 19th centuries, when North African corsairs and European powers clashed over shipping, tribute, and naval security. Ottoman influence lasted until the early 20th century, when Italy, seeking an overseas empire, invaded during the Italo-Turkish War in 1911. Italy established colonies in Tripolitania and Cyrenaica, later unifying them as Italian Libya. Colonial rule was violent, especially during resistance in the east, where Libyans fought harsh campaigns against occupation. Italian colonial rule left deep scars. Italy promoted settlement, infrastructure, and imperial prestige, but these projects served colonial goals rather than Libyan self-rule. Resistance was met with repression, forced displacement, and brutality. During World War II, Libya became a major battlefield in the North African campaign, as Axis and Allied forces fought across the desert. After Italy's defeat, the colonial order collapsed, and the Italian population in Libya declined. In 1951, Libya became independent as a kingdom under King Idris I. This made it one of the first African countries to gain independence after the war. But the new state faced huge challenges. It had to bring together historically distinct regions, build institutions from a weak base, and manage a large territory with limited resources. Then oil changed everything. Discoveries in the late 1950s transformed Libya from a poor kingdom into a state with major strategic and economic importance. Oil became Libya's greatest asset and one of its greatest complications. The country holds some of the world's largest proven oil reserves, and energy exports became the backbone of the economy. Oil revenue allowed the state to fund development, infrastructure, subsidies, and public employment. But it also concentrated power around whoever controlled the state. In countries where the government depends heavily on natural resource income, rulers may rely less on taxation and public accountability, because they can finance themselves through exports. This is often called the resource curse. Wealth can strengthen the state, but it can also encourage corruption, patronage, and conflict. In Libya, oil wealth made political control extremely valuable. It also increased foreign interest in the country. Libya's energy resources tied its internal politics to global markets, international diplomacy, and the strategic calculations of outside powers. In 1969, Libya's monarchy was overthrown in a bloodless military coup led by a young officer named Muammar Gaddafi. King Idris I was removed, and Libya became a republic. Gaddafi would go on to rule for 42 years, making him one of the longest-serving non-royal leaders in the world. His rule combined revolutionary rhetoric, Arab nationalism, anti-imperialism, and an unusual political ideology presented in his Green Book. Formally, he claimed Libya was governed through popular committees and direct democracy. In practice, real power remained centered around Gaddafi, his inner circle, security forces, and networks of loyalty. Critics described him as a dictator. Oil wealth funded social programs, foreign policy ambitions, and the security apparatus. Libya under Gaddafi was unpredictable internationally, at times isolated, at times courted, and frequently controversial. Domestically, political opposition was tightly restricted, leaving few independent institutions outside the regime. The weakness of institutions became crucial in 2011. During the Arab Spring, protests and uprisings spread across the region, challenging long-standing rulers. In Libya, demonstrations quickly escalated into armed rebellion. Gaddafi's forces fought opposition groups, and the conflict became a civil war. NATO intervened militarily after a United Nations-backed effort to protect civilians, and the balance shifted against the regime. Gaddafi was overthrown and killed in 2011, authority passed first to the National Transitional Council and then to elected bodies, but the fall of the ruler did not produce a stable state. One reason was that Gaddafi had spent decades preventing strong independent institutions from developing. After his fall, many armed groups that had fought the regime kept their weapons and local power. Instead of one national army and one clear political order, Libya had revolutionary militias, regional factions, and competing claims to legitimacy. By 2014, Libya had split into a deeper political crisis. Rival authorities claimed to govern the country, with competing power centers associated with Tripoli in the west and Tobruk in the east. Armed groups, tribal forces, Islamist militias, local councils, and military coalitions all played roles in the struggle. The conflict was not simply a two-sided civil war, it was a fragmented contest over territory, oil facilities, institutions, ideology, and foreign backing. Control of the central bank, the National Oil Corporation, ports, and ministries mattered because these institutions represented access to revenue and international recognition. Ordinary Libyans paid a heavy price. Security deteriorated, services weakened, displacement increased, and migration routes through Libya became more dangerous. The country's crisis was political, humanitarian, and economic all at once. Libya had oil wealth on paper, but many citizens faced instability in everyday life. A permanent ceasefire was signed in 2020 by the main warring sides, raising hopes that Libya could move toward elections and reunification. A unity government took authority with the goal of preparing a democratic process. But political rivalries did not disappear. Elections were repeatedly delayed, and disputes continued over who had the right to govern. In 2022, the House of Representatives stopped recognizing the government of national unity and proclaimed an alternative administration, the Government of National Stability. Since then, Libya has faced a dual-power situation, with rival governments functioning at the same time. The international community continues to recognize the unity government as the legitimate government, but recognition alone does not solve the realities on the ground. Libya's future depends on whether political actors can agree on rules for elections, control of armed forces, distribution of oil revenue, and a constitutional framework accepted across regions. Libya today is a country of contradictions. It is geographically huge but demographically small. It is rich in oil but still classified as a developing country. It has strategic value, yet its institutions remain divided. It is part of the United Nations, the African Union, the Arab League, OPEC, and other major international organizations, but at home it continues to struggle with legitimacy and governance. Libya also faces environmental pressures. Despite its small population, it has very high greenhouse gas emissions per person by African standards, largely tied to its energy economy, while progress on climate commitments has been limited. The central question is whether Libya can convert its advantages into stability, its coastline, its location, its oil reserves, and its human capital. The country's history shows repeated cycles of outside influence and internal fragmentation. Its future depends on building institutions strong enough to outlast individual leaders, militias, and rival governments. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.